Hello, it's Dr. Cindy again. I spoke previously about how our concepts of ourselves and the ways we learn to deal with emotions are formed through our interactions with others as we are growing up, and about the ways in which the conclusions we come to as children based on those experiences become programmed into our brains, serving as a template for how we view and respond to situations throughout the rest of our lives. Today, I will talk more about how that translates into adulthood and the challenges that can cause, and I'm going to teach you a strategy I developed for trying to address this. So, as a reminder, we all come into this world with three essential needs: care for physical needs, connection for social needs, and compassion and comfort for emotional needs. As children, we are heavily reliant on our parents for all of these to be taken care of. And if any of them are not sufficiently or consistently met, it can feel like a threat to our very existence. This makes it incredibly distressing for a child if a caregiver is upset with them. So the child is highly motivated to try to prevent that from happening. When difficult interactions arise at home, children create their own interpretations and conclusions about why these occur, then develop strategies to try to take care of the perceived problem. They'll often test out a variety of behaviors in an effort to try to figure out which ones might secure their parents' love. Because the child's perspective is that love is earned through right behavior and therefore at risk with wrong behavior, in their mind, that makes them inherently not lovable independent of that. And whatever behaviors yield more positive reactions from others and or less negative ones become a child's internalized like rules to live by, a guidebook of what they think they have to do in order to be loved. Let's look at some ways that might carry over into adulthood. A boy whose strategy for being loved is to get good grades or excel at sports might become a driven, perfectionistic, overachieving man who is never satisfied with what he accomplishes and ultimately feels like a failure because in his mind, nothing is good enough. No amount of external success can override his misperception that he is unlovable, and any actual failure would be devastating to him. A girl whose self-worth becomes tied in with being helpful can grow up to be a woman who can't say no to others and does everything for everyone else and nothing for herself. She feels guilty and like she's being selfish if she wants to put herself first, and never prioritizing her own needs continually reinforces that belief that they don't matter. She may enjoy a temporary ego boost each time she does something for another person, but that little girl inside will keep wondering, what about me? And she'll inevitably continue to feel neglected and deprived and therefore unloved. The boy who grows up stuffing his feelings because expressing them makes adults upset with him may have a great deal of difficulty connecting to others as a man. He won't know how to handle situations that are emotional in nature, which will be particularly problematic in romantic relationships. He may shut down during conflicts or explode at other times when the feelings he has bottled up can't be contained anymore. His partner will likely react poorly to both of these reactions, which will further erode his self-esteem and reinforce his feelings of worthlessness. A child who learns that being a good girl means being quiet and polite might turn into a woman who has no voice in her work and personal relationships, keeping her opinions to herself in order to not make waves. She may be responded to positively by others for being so accommodating, but internally she'll believe that people wouldn't actually love her for who she is, especially if they knew what she really thinks and feels. Over time, she likely loses sight of who she is and what her true thoughts and feelings are. She'll have a nagging sense that she's living a lie, and at some point, her own truth will insist on being acknowledged by her and on being shared with others. So, these are some typical ways that our early childhood experiences can pattern how we perceive and interact with others in our efforts to be loved and to earn and maintain our worthiness as adults. But as a reminder, this entire framework is faulty because it is based on the false premise that we are inherently unworthy and unlovable, which just isn't true. And as I have said before, you can never actually solve a problem that isn't real, which is why the strategies we develop for being loved never actually accomplish that. Be that as it may, our brain superimposes that template we've created onto our present relationships, fitting our current interactions within that framework of our past experiences. But the old behaviors that we developed as strategies as children often don't work for us in the same way that they seemed to back then. When others don't respond to us in the way we think they should, such as affirming our value in some way, it feels like the rules have been violated. That resonates with our past hurts, triggering those deep feelings of insecurity and inadequacy from so long ago. And we often experience all of that pain and hurt as coming from the person we are in conflict with in the moment. So our interactions with others touch the sensitivities in us from our own personal history. It's like when you get a massage. I know, weird analogy, right? But bear with me. A massage therapist often encounters tender areas in our body that we may not even have been aware of. She or he then works on those spots trying to release whatever is causing the pain. Now, we don't blame or get mad at the massage therapist for causing us pain because we recognize it's coming from a sensitivity that was already inside of us. But when someone touches one of our emotional sore spots, we feel angry or hurt or otherwise upset with that person who we think is making us feel that way, unless we have done the work of learning about our personal story and being attentive to the ways in which we replay it in the present. So I would propose that every encounter we have with someone brings the opportunity to reveal and therefore to heal old wounds that weren't sufficiently attended to at the time. So why don't we just naturally do that? Because no one taught us how to actually take care of tough feelings, which is why they've been held onto as painful experiences to begin with. We've got all of these raw, unprocessed emotions from our past stored up in our minds like closets stuffed with hurtful memories. When those doors are closed, the difficult feelings are not in our conscious awareness, so it might seem like everything's just fine as long as they stay shut. But we know they're in there, and we also know how incredibly painful and overwhelming it feels whenever something in present time resonates with a pain from the past. The door bursts open and a cascade of emotions comes crashing down on us. And we are all wired to avoid pain and to make it stop as quickly as possible when we experience it. So what do? Shove it all back in and slam the door shut. And once all of those memories are gathered up and put away again, we feel better for the time being until the next thing that causes that flood of emotions again. So essentially, our minds become this house of horrors with us living in terror that at any moment we could be ambushed. Now, people understandably feel frustrated and exasperated that our mind does this because it's challenging enough to manage whatever the immediate triggering situation is, let alone all of the other painful memories and experiences the brain dredges up in response to this. It can truly feel like our brain is trying to torture us, replaying in vivid detail what may seem like some of the lowest moments of our lives. But what if the point isn't to torment us at all, but to draw our attention to something we need to take care of? Maybe it's our brain's way of saying, hey, can we clean up this mess once and for all? Our brain only retrieves information that it considers to be important. Once it is deemed unnecessary, it goes away. Well, who gets to decide that? We do. We are the ones who keep stuffing all the memories back in the closet rather than really dealing with them when they come out. That means we have the capacity to start freeing ourselves from them. Maybe we don't have to be emotional hoarders anymore and can start to declutter what we've kept inside for so long. Do we really need to hold on to every moment in our lives that didn't feel good? Can we maybe get rid of that time we felt embarrassed in kindergarten or rejected in high school? Because every one of those memories that we actually process and heal becomes one less thing to come crashing down on us the next time that emotional closet springs open. And when we can free ourselves from some of those painful memories, we will begin to experience present day situations as the adults that we are rather than as the children that we were. How great would it be to receive feedback from your boss without feeling like a 5-year-old being scolded by a parent? And how wonderful might it feel to be able to have a disagreement with your spouse and not experience yourself as being unworthy and unlovable in the process? This requires taking some time to figure out what your personal story is. That will feel challenging since there is hurt and pain attached to it. But if you can go into it being open to the possibility that maybe at least parts of the story were never accurate to begin with, and that your reactions today might be based on faulty conclusions you came to in the past and are replaying in the present, then you can correct those flaws in the storyline and start living out a version of your life that is more accurate and true. How can we start addressing these experiences that we filed away as painful memories? I'm going to talk you through a 3-step process I've developed for transforming situations that can trigger our emotional vulnerabilities. Recording the situation, attending to the feelings, and reviewing the narrative. So step 1, recording the situation. Whenever anything challenging arises, no matter how big or small, write down as much as you can about it, preferably in that moment. Details of the situation itself, your initial emotional reactions and thoughts, and any other thoughts or feelings that flow from that. Try to allow for a stream of consciousness, not directing or stopping your thoughts in any way. The goal is to use this as an opportunity to gather information about how your mind is experiencing and processing the situation. Let's take an example of a boss asking about a report she needs, which gets experienced as criticism. The initial narrative might go something like this. I can't believe she just came in here and yelled at me about not having that project finished. I have been busting my butt trying to finish it on top of all the other work that keeps getting piled on, some of which isn't even my job. She acts like I just sit around here all day doing nothing. She never notices all of the work that I do get done, and nothing is ever good enough for her. Why does this happen in every job I have? Am I just not cut out for corporate America? What if I get laid off because she thinks I'm not performing? Should I start looking for another job? There will typically be 3 aspects of our response to a challenging situation: action, reaction, and mindset. Here, the action is the boss asking about the report. The reaction, feeling criticized, is the emotional response triggered by the interpretations of that action, which are based on the pre-existing mindset about how love is obtained. This mindset both triggers the emotional reaction and becomes reinforced by it. For example, if your self-worth is defined by approval from others, the boss's request will register as disapproval, which then confirms your unworthiness because you're being disapproved of. So I call this process an automatic response mechanism, or ARM, because as soon as a situation touches an emotional sensitivity within us, we arm ourselves for action. Our brain starts working on the perceived problem, evaluating reasons for it, anticipating and preparing for other possible problems, and seeking resolution. Some version of the associated action-reaction mindset chain gets played out over and over again, often at night when we're trying to go to sleep, because the mind wants to rehash perceived problems until they are resolved. This might include concluding my boss is a jerk and filing that away as a negative grievance that will be held against her in future encounters. People often don't go any further than that initial automatic response that gets triggered. That's why it's so important to go on to the next 2 steps. Otherwise, it stays fixed in memory in this raw, unprocessed, and inaccurate form that serves as yet another example of the experiences our mindset expects us to have. And this will get relived and played out again whenever we perceive ourselves to be in a similar situation. So imagine how this would affect our feelings about being at work and having to interact with that boss. So in step 2, after you've recorded everything that comes to mind about the upsetting situation, you're going to tend to the hurt. Remember, the only way to truly take care of difficult feelings is to respond to them with care and compassion. So you would close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, take some deep breaths, and connect to the painful emotions. Then provide comfort, empathy, and support to soothe those feelings until they subside. I'm right here. I hear you. I'm so sorry. That really hurt. This feels so unfair. I've got you. You're okay. At this point, the emotional intensity will have been resolved, but the story you created about it has not. So the third and final step of reviewing the situation is crucial for disarming the initial narrative. If you can do it right away after the other steps, that is ideal. But if you can't immediately, Be sure to revisit it later in the day when you have the time and space to do so. Because once you have tended to the hurt and the strong emotional reaction has subsided, the more rational, logical part of your brain can be engaged and it can examine and process the situation from a more accurate perspective. So, in this step, you will go back over your notes to review and revise the narrative based on the following considerations. The first one is interaction. Rather than viewing the situation as a hurtful action against you, approach it as an interaction with you. And by that, I mean there is something about what the other person said or did that interacted with your particular sensitivity. It's like a key that unlocked the door to your painful emotional reaction. Because if you didn't have that sensitivity, then there wouldn't have even been a negative reaction to begin with. The next part is assessment. You're going to ask yourself, what is my sensitivity? And examine the story for clues about what it is that caused you to react so strongly to the other person's behavior. Pay special attention to the verbs that you used, like scolded, yelled, criticized. Those all sound a lot like the behavior of a parent toward a child. Also note superlatives and extreme statements like always and never. Any type of exaggerated global characterization has to be an overreaction to what just happened and is likely a reflection of what your mindset is about yourself. The next thing to look at are memories, which are reflected in the story. Anything that involves experiences from the past needs to be extracted from the narrative as it's not relevant to the specific situation. But it might lead you to the origin of your reaction. See what information you can discover about where this reaction is really coming from. What does this incident remind you of? Similar experiences from the past may come to mind, along with whatever challenging feelings are attached to those memories. And when that occurs, you will need to tend to the hurt again. I know, here we go again, right? Having to deal with feelings. You know, it's interesting. When we have a physical injury and we notice that it's bothering us even after some time has passed, we ask ourselves, why does this still hurt? And then we take some type of action to help it heal further. But with an emotional injury, we ask ourselves, why does this still hurt? We get mad at ourselves for still being bothered by it and try to shove it farther back into that closet. Then we go about limping through life with all of these hurt feelings that have never been attended to. Whenever old emotional hurts arise, take advantage of this as an opportunity to bring resolution to them. The next step is observation, looking at it more objectively and asking what really happened. It's like in those old police shows where the cop would say, just the facts, ma'am. Go back to the scene of the crime and write the actual observable things that took place with as much neutrality as possible. For example, my boss came in and said, how are you doing on that report? I told her I was trying to finish it, and she said, I really need it today, so please get it to me soon. That sounds a lot different, doesn't it? And the final part is knowledge. What do I really need? What do I really know to be true about my relationship with this person, about the situation, and about myself? For example, I know that this report is really important to my boss. I know she actually values my work. I know that I'm good at what I do and that my job is secure. When you have done this work, you end up with a very different and much more accurate version of the situation. And that can then be the narrative that is saved in your brain rather than the one that had so much emotional pain and inaccurate perceptions and conclusions attached to it. And which would you rather file away at the end of the day? Yet another story based on false beliefs that cause you to continue to arm yourself, or a story that ends with, I am okay. Take care. I'll talk to you next week.